Hello.
Hi, folks. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm Joe Firestone, your host, and Ezra Willson is our election expert.
Hello.
And the dialogue here is going to be that I got a lot of questions to ask Ezra, and then he's going to try to answer them as best he can. Eh, and then we're just going to mix it up. Uh, there's really so much to talk about. Um, Okay. I think we should probably go over a lot of the races again, see
hmm
how things are stacking up according to the polls, see how things are stacking up in terms of the money that's coming in, insofar as we know what's going on with the money.
Yeah, so we were just talking about this. The biggest qualm I guess I have about the way that predicting elections is going right now and sort of understanding what's going on in the United States elections, especially in the congressional elections, is just that the polling is very off, and I think that that's I don't know, that's something I've just been completely dumbfounded by the past several days. So we had some polls in the House races come in this past several days. And I think that that'll just show you how weird the polling is in terms of who's doing well, right? So in Kentucky, Kansas's third district, which is a swing district, I think now as redistricted, it is a Trump district, barely. I could be wrong about that. No, actually, it might narrowly be a district that Biden won. But Sharice Davids is facing a pretty um, well established Republican candidate. And a lot of people haven't been that certain that she's going to win. But some poll came out from Siena in the New York Times that showed her a 14% lead in a toss up district, right? Meaning
14% lead?
14% lead in a toss up district.
Oh,
That
that's amazing. Was that the New York Times?
that's the New York Times poll, which admittedly I'm kind of concerned that that's a little off for obvious reasons, but New York Times and Siena are some of the better polling company. It is one of the better polling companies, so I do think that's a little interesting.
Right, but the specific poll you were talking about, is that the one that had the 792 respondents?
No, this one was only 431 likely voters in the district.
Oh, I see. But this one was focused on the district.
This one was focused just on the Kansas district, and then they did the same day they released the poll for the New Mexico second district.
Okay, so just for that district, the number of respondents was probably pretty good.
431, yeah. I mean, I would still look towards at least 550 on a House poll to say a good number of voters, but 430 is not that bad, I guess.
Okay, but you think it is a little suspect for that reason.
Well, yeah, and I just think it's weird to say that a Democrat's going to be winning Kansas's third district that was
By
made more
14 points.
GOP by 14 points when the Republicans have a pretty decent candidate, from my understanding. Similarly, they pulled New Mexico's second district, which is where Yvette Harrell is. She just flipped the seat from Blue Dog Axolotl, or not Axolotl, in 2020, right? And so it's a very swing district. Surprisingly, now they have Vasquez, Gabe Vasquez. He's, from my understanding, kind of progressive in some language, but I couldn't find anything that appealing on his website. But anyway, winning that district by 1%. And then the same day, another poll came out that showed, Seth Mosinger, the treasurer of Rhode Island, well established there financially and name wise, is actually tied, if not losing, his congressional race in a fairly blue district. So it's kind of interesting just looking at those three House races. How one race, one poll shows a race about where you'd expect it, a little better for Democrats. One just shows it way better for Democrats, and one shows it dramatically worse for Republicans, or dramatically worse for Democrats. And it's kind of just weird to me that the polls are sort of all over the place. And I guess it could just be geographical shifts are very wild this year, but I don't know. Um, we were talking too about the
Let's start off with a more general question.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything happening as far as you can see in terms of a change of Democratic strategy? I mean, over, say, the last week?
Over the last week, I mean, I think some of it depends on the races. I think some candidates are getting more aggressive. I think that's good. I'm seeing sort of a shift in rhetoric to being more really calling out the Republicans on certain things.
Okay.
I mean, I don't watch like mainstream media really enough to know what the general like liberal pundit messaging is. But as far as campaigns go, I still think Democrats are really lacking in certain policy areas, certainly in economic policy areas. They might cling on to just abortion, one-liners about abortion, or put a "I'm pro-choice" on like a campaign merchandise thing or whatever. Or have their couple sound bites that are sort
So
of
you're not seeing a
policy.
shift over to economic issues?
I'm still really not seeing that, and I think that that's where Republicans always do better than Democrats, right? They can complain about the gas prices, they can complain about inflation, and then people just hear those words, and 50% of the country is like, oh, okay, I agree with that, right? And Democrats have weak messaging to counteract that. And a lot of the time, I still don't think Democrats are really learning that messaging. Certainly think some progressives, I think, are much better on that, and some liberal candidates maybe try and tackle that a bit more as well. But I don't know. It still seems like an issue broadly that Democrats aren't paying attention to, despite the fact, or aren't good rhetorically on, despite the fact that it's probably the most important issue for the most amount of voters.
Stan Greenberg has been trying to get large numbers of Democrats to begin to focus on the economic issue, take the inflation issue on head on, okay, and emphasize the fact that the major cause of inflation at this point is price gouging by the corporations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then attack the Republicans because they never talk about that as a factor, okay, in inflation, when some analyses have come out that show that that's the major cause of inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, as far as you can see, has he been making any progress in terms of candidates shifting their messaging over to economics and beginning to attack uh, 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 um, the Republicans on grounds that they talk about inflation all the time. They blame the Democrats for inflation, but given that the real cause of inflation is the price gouging,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't intend to do anything about the price gouging at all because they never do anything
Yeah.
that regulates business or manages. So
Well, they really just don't do anything usually. But
they
yeah.
just don't do anything. So the point is, if you want something to be done about inflation, you have to stick with the Democrats because they're the only one of the two parties that may do something about it if they can move their president
Mm-hmm.
to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I agree with that. And I don't really think a lot of messaging is still about really honing in on that. I think sometimes Democrats, right, it's they have one message that maybe works for a little bit and they keep using it. So I still am seeing ones talk like campaigns or pundits or whatever talk about, oh, Republicans are hypocrites, right? They say inflation is bad, spending is bad, but they funded Trump's tax cuts. And it's like,
Right. And they're
right,
in
like,
favor of more tax cuts right now.
yeah, exactly. And I think that can be a strong message, but it's been the same message since 2017. And it's just like a couple lines that, I don't know, don't have anything new to the conversation. There's no real nuance to how that connects to the modern issues, right? And so Democrats will attack Republicans on things like that, and they'll try and tie in Trump or whatever to it. And like I just don't think that that's remotely appealing to any voter. Like I don't think that that's helping bring people over to your side.
Okay. If you come at it suggesting specific policies
Yeah,
do something about inflation. Would that be more effective for the
yeah,
country?
I think having something more concrete, but also understanding that people aren't going to. So I think what a lot of times Democrats in particular do is they either have this one repeated message that they use for way too long that doesn't really register with people, or they have these really big pieces of legislation or statements or whatever, and they'll sit there and they'll talk about it, or they'll send it out to people, and it's like no one's going to read that unless they're already involved in politics and probably already um, made up their mind on who they're voting for and those sorts of things. Republicans, on the other hand, know how to effectively craft simple messages about the policy positions they support, about the rhetorical whatevers, right? You know, they can talk about critical race theory. They can say inflation is bad and is making it so we can't afford anything, right? Like they're very quick at being able to make those, and Democrats' responses are either this one liner that has never changed or this 2-page statement that no one's going to read, right? So I think you're right. They need to be able to. I think Democrats' biggest issue is finding out how to concisely and in layman terms, right, talk about policy positions in a way that speaks to non-college educated Americans, right, especially because that is sort of a strong GOP group that my assumption would be is pretty malleable to Democrats, right? Suburban people, people that just sort of are more independent minded, but maybe don't have thought like college degrees and aren't going to be reading through all these policy papers and aren't going to be paying as much attention. They're not apolitical, but they don't have enough time to devote to politics. They work
Sure,
60-hour work weeks, things like that.
sure.
Um, I don't know if that sounds rambly or if that was all coherent, but that's sort of my perspective on Democratic messaging. I'm still a little bit out of it. Like, I just haven't seen as much from, I'm mostly focusing on progressives or local races. But
Yeah,
I,
I really haven't seen any change this week either.
yeah.
Okay, in other words, okay, I have seen people talking about the need for a strong closing message during this final 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
and talking about what that message ought to be, but I haven't been seeing any candidates actually taking up that kind of message. They
Mm-hmm.
still seem like they're more following through with their old message,
Yeah.
and they have the idea that that can still be effective if only we get out our voters.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like now they're focused on, rather than changing the message, on just getting out
Yeah.
their voters and hoping that's going to be enough to win.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't think just hoping that you can register as many people, especially in the last weeks when states don't even have voter registration open and people are voting by mail and things like that anyway. I think that's certainly an issue, especially in the younger demographic, is people aren't voting. And so I think it's important for the Democratic Party to really be reaching out to people and making sure they're voting. But at this point, they also need to be doing more instead of just saying, oh, these people voted for Trump once or they voted for these Republicans more often than Democrats. They're probably not really going to be open to our ideas. So let's just kind of ignore them and focus on others. That's not going to win you politics because you still need some of those people. You still need to be able to get a majority of the votes, right? Um, and yeah, I don't know. I'm just going on a tangent again, but I think I missed something else. I was going to respond to something else you were saying. But
Here's a tricky question. Okay, and it may be somewhat off the wall. Uh, okay, given what's been happening in one race, specifically the Fetterman-Oz race,
mm-hmm,
which has certainly been getting a lot of national attention,
mm-hmm.
is that tending to wake up people again to the abortion rights issue? Because that particular race seems to be coming down to that issue, and Oz is reminding people how terrible the Republicans are on that particular issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's certainly interesting. I unfortunately didn't have time to watch the debate to sort of understand what the rhetoric is going on in there, just because I was at work and I haven't had time to sit down and watch it.
But the major thing that people are focusing on is a very, very, it's a small soundbite.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, after basically Fetterman having the short end of the stick, okay, in most of the debate because, he was having problems with his speech. In other words, he
Mm-hmm.
has audio processing problems, as part of the recovery from a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
So people were mostly noticing that, for the debate, and it wasn't good for Fetterman. But there came a point, okay, in the debate where they were focusing on the abortion rights issue, and Oz, I guess he wasn't alert to the framing. He'd been trying to dodge what his position actually was for the whole debate.
Mm-hmm.
Fetterman kept on repeating his position, which was this: I'm for codifying Roe v. Wade.
Mm-hmm.
All I want to do is Roe v. Wade. And people were asking him questions about, well, would you do this in a different way? Would you do that in a different way? And partly because of his audio processing issues, he kept on coming back to his standby.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to legalize Roe v. Wade. That's all I want to legalize it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Oz, who's not having those kinds of difficulties, started to get, a little luxurious in his messaging.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point he said, I want to have women, their doctors, and local politicians all involved in the decision that a woman makes.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, the Democrats and Fetterman have jumped on top of that. And they're
Yeah.
coming with cartoons and various things showing what it would be like to have the local politicians involved in making decisions about
Mm-hmm.
whether to have an abortion or not. And they're having a field day with that. And Fetterman, at least, seems to be benefiting from it because, it makes the Republicans look really silly.
Yeah.
But it also seems to be having a concrete effect because Fetterman, since the debate, has raised $2 million.
Yep.
So that seems to be where it's really biting. And of course, he's using the $2 million on these ads to hammer Oz.
Nice.
Okay, but my question actually was, is that having a wider effect than simply that contest? Is it bringing home to people again that they ought to be paying attention to the abortion rights issue because this is going to be a real horror show unless something is done about the Supreme Court decision?
Yes. So, yeah, I agree. Something like that, I think, catches eyes, right? And the Fetterman debate was something people were talking about for days, and certainly it was all over social media, it was all over the news. And I think that helps bring things back into the conversation. But I also don't think a Senate debate in one state is really going to be enough to really energize and bring on or not energize, but really wake people up to what's going on in the Republican Party. It could be a really strong messaging for Fetterman, for Pennsylvania Republicans or Democrats, and it might be a message that Democrats try and pull into other races a little bit. Like, look at these Republicans. This is a consistent issue with the Republican platform about the fact that they want control over our bodies, they want control over our decisions, and they really aren't putting people first, right? Um, but I don't know. I still don't think that. I don't think that relying on sound bites is gonna be what really helps Democrats. I still do think things like that, just the messaging on abortion and making sure that that stays in the front and really talking about what Democrats are going to do beyond stopping Republicans, codifying Roe, right? Talk about how you're going to enshrine contraceptives, abortion rights, like things like that into law, and what are your concrete positions on that? What
Right.
values do you have? And I think that Democrats are doing that, and I think that that's why they're doing as well as they are this year. But certainly, like I think that that's only speaking to a certain crowd of people. The Democrats have pretty much already probably gotten pretty energized to vote, right? A lot of people I know are pretty energized to vote because of abortion issues, right? Certainly younger people, women, things like that, people like that. Um, but there,
So, does it help for Joe Biden to come into the mix and say that if Democrats win, the first thing he's going to do is codify Roe?
I mean, I think that it would be beneficial if Joe Biden was able to say, "Look, we're codifying Roe, right? Let's, you know, let's work on it now. Let's show you all that we have it already, right? And once you vote, once we're able to get past the filibuster on that, then we're good to codify Roe, right? And we'll stop Republicans from being able to, undo your rights. And it's not just going to be codifying Roe; it's going to be protecting contraceptives. Although I think Congress actually already recently did that one, if I recall correctly. But it's going to be, talking more than just codifying Roe, right? Really speaking to the concerns that a lot of people have on social issues right now. Because there are a lot of people that don't feel safe, and there are a lot of people that don't think that, that they're sort of afraid about what a Republican future is going to be, I think is a way to put it.
So,
Um,
2 points about that. One reason why they're so afraid about what a Republican future is going to look like is because they have a Supreme Court
yeah.
and they're putting down these decisions that appear radical and appear
Hmm.
wrong from the Supreme Court. So, to make people feel safer, don't the Democrats have to come right out and say, we're going to pack the court? We're going to relieve your anxiety about this court because this court is not going to be this court for much longer if you give us the Senate, and give us the House.
Hmm.
We pledge that we're going to pack it.
Yeah, potentially. I just don't know how that type of messaging works with like independents or potential people who are leaning to Republicans who are probably like I think those people who are going to be reassured by court packing are already going to come out and vote. They're already energized to bring themselves out to vote, their friends, their family, whatever, out to vote, right?
Right,
Um,
I don't know if they really are because the Democrats aren't promising to do anything about the Supreme Court. In other words, they're
that's
promising to do something specific with respect to Roe, but as far as promising other things, they're not really promising anything that's going to be effective.
that's
Packing the
true.
court would be effective.
Yeah, my biggest concern is just that I don't know the best way to deliver that as a message to people because I think a lot of people I already think that Republicans sort of got ahead of Democrats on that in some ways in terms of messaging and we're able to be like this that like it's very easy to frame adding justices to the court as anti-democratic or something like even if that's not what it is, right? Even if the reason for it is entirely rational and Republicans already in effect packed the court, right? I just wonder rhetorically, especially with only 2 weeks to the election, not even if Democrats would be able to craft a message that doesn't make it sound like they want some radical change and taking over the government or preventing Republicans from being able to check Democratic power or something like that.
Yeah, right. But on the other hand, the source of anxiety for these people about what it's going to be like to live under the Republicans, okay, is the fact that the Supreme Court is destabilizing things. It's
Yeah.
changing a
Yeah.
bunch of things, okay, and it's dangerous. And
Yeah.
people have anxiety about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so why wouldn't it be logical for them to say, oh, the Democrats are going to fix this by packing the court so these guys won't be able to do that anymore? Now,
Hmm.
I mean, it seems to
No,
me.
I think that there's certainly messaging there. I just would hope that Democrats find a way to also be able to counteract, instead of just saying their positions, they're able to also counteract those GOP talking points about it. I guess on court packing, I think that that is pretty easy, and I think that people that certainly have advocated for it are able to discuss the fact that it's really rebalancing the court back in favor of the people, instead of having a really Republican-packed court that's going to, just institute like religious, I'm forgetting the word, but yeah,
Religious fanaticism.
yeah, there you go, that works. Um, and things like that. And so, yeah, I don't know.
One interesting thing about the Fetterman performance, he was asked the question about court packing, and his answer was, he's not for court packing. He's not for changing the court.
Mm-hmm.
So he thinks that in Pennsylvania, it isn't popular to say you're going to pack the court.
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty firm in saying that he wasn't going to vote for that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things, right? That just the way just the way it's contentious right now, and the fact that both sides are sort of fighting about it potentially, and I think both sides have very good points, or very digestible points, in terms of the way they explain that issue. I can understand why like swing district or swing state candidates, like Fetterman, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back and go over some of the specific races again,
Mm-hmm.
and see how people are doing compared to how we think they were doing last week.
Yeah. So
California.
I was actually. Yeah, I'll mention those races in a little bit, just because I want to get back to Steve's comment about the Republicans losing the chambers. Or I overall I agree that like Democrats are probably still in good position to take the Senate, even though the Pennsylvania race is getting more competitive, even though Democrats are probably losing Wisconsin at this point, and it's sort of out of reach for them the way it's going. I think right, things are just going to be going back in Fetterman's favor after the debate settles down a little bit, certainly, and he's able to get those ads back up about Oz's blunder at the debates, and his various policy positions, and the fact that Oz, the same messaging we've seen from Fetterman. I think he's got a pretty strong messaging. I think in the next couple weeks, he's going to be able to really get that message out, and people aren't going to be thinking about, some speech issues he had during a debate right after he had a stroke, right? Like, and in terms of that race too, I just think it's interesting. As I mentioned to Joe, people are sort of dooming about the race, but polls still pretty consistently show Fetterman in the lead, except one poll that just kind of came out of the blue from a company that's sometimes very biased towards Republicans, from my understanding, and just shows Oz with a 3% lead, which is way out of the ballpark of any other polls that I've seen, right? They're all Fetterman wins 2 to 5%. I just think that that's worth noting.
So this is interesting. Kay Ryan says that Fetterman was on Joy Reid's show and sounded fine.
I mean, it's probably like he's recovered. It's been a couple days, so he's probably doing better anyway. And on a show, you're not talking as long, I'm assuming. Assuming it was probably just a 5-10 minute segment at most. But.
Well, to quote what Lisa has to say, uh, she thinks the format of the debate was very bad for Fetterman because it was a rapid fire sort of format. When questions were asked, you had maybe 30 seconds to answer a question.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes when there was a response involved, you had only 15 seconds for the response.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and she said that that kind of format had a very ableist kind, okay, of bias. And at
Yeah,
that
that's
point,
honest. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's certainly a lot of ableism, not just in the debate itself, although I agree with that. I probably didn't really think about it as much, but just in the coverage about it, people just are incredibly ableist. And also just like, I think it's just very simple to acknowledge the fact that Fetterman really held his own, despite the fact that he's got a stroke, despite the fact that he doesn't have a lot of media appearance. And like Dr. Oz has been on TV for 20 something years. And I don't know. I just think comparing the two and just being, I don't know. I feel like people who say Fetterman's going to lose the race because he didn't do as well as Oz in the debate or didn't speak as well as Oz in the debate, like, I just don't think I don't think it was realistic to expect him to, given his condition. I think he still held his own through most of what I've seen and heard of the debate, with minus a couple different spots.
but to address what Kay was saying, when Fetterman went on to Joy Reid show, and I didn't see this, but I assume what Joy did was to ask him some questions and give him a lot of time to answer the questions at his own pace. In other words, with her, it wouldn't have been a rapid fire thing. Okay,
Yeah.
it would have been something where she was looking to support Fetterman and to assist him in communicating straightforwardly. So I'm thinking the format of her interview with Fetterman was far different than the format of the debate. Um, is that okay? Steve says, but Democrats will lose both houses. Uh, I think they may. There's certainly a good chance of that. But there's also a good chance that they won't lose both houses.
Yeah. I mean, most likely scenario, I'm trying to understand what people in the chat are saying a little better. I still overall think Fetterman bounces back. And I think if Democrats lose the Senate seat in Nevada, it doesn't really matter. They still win the Senate. It would be nice if they pick that up. And so either way, I would have to still assume Democrats win the Senate. Unless things get worse, I don't really think things are going to get worse at this point in the election for Democrats. I could be wrong about that, certainly.
Why have things gotten worse in Wisconsin? I know Barnes looked
Um,
for a while.
I mean, Barnes has always had some issues. Certainly, Ron Johnson probably has a lot more. But I don't know. A lot of maybe it was the fact that Ron Johnson didn't really have a primary challenge, and Mandela Barnes had a primary challenge with some competitors, or competitor supporters who had sort of dug things up about his past, or just things like that that maybe killed some momentum for him or support for him, would be certainly one thing. And Ron Johnson, I mean, has done well in previous elections, right? You know, he's got more experience running than Mandela Barnes, who's only run, second on the ticket, right? Working with running with the governor,
Yeah.
In one race, statewide.
Okay.
And
It
so,
just sort of seems to me offhand that Ron Johnson would be an easy guy to run against he's had so many extreme kinds of
Yeah.
things that he's done in positions. He's so tied to Trump. Uh, I mean, it seems to me it should be possible to attack him the whole time.
Yeah, I agree. I think
I
perhaps
mean,
what
he
happened
really
was that
pushes
all
negative.
of yeah, but one thing I noticed though early in the primary was that all of the Democratic candidates were like, Ron Johnson did this, Ron Johnson's done that, Ron Johnson's done this, bad, right? And that's perhaps why Democrats were leading the polls a bit earlier in the cycle. And maybe it's just that they've run out of attacks or just isn't landing with voters as much anymore. Like that's why a lot of the time, if you have dirt on candidates, you wait until less than a month before the election, so it stays fresh in the voters' minds, so that voters don't sort of get annoyed of hearing it over and over and just push it off. So I think that that's one thing worth happening. And just a lot of people, I'm trying to remember in the recent debate, um, they ended up fact checking something about what Mandela Barnes was saying as an attack on Ron Johnson. Um, and so I don't know, maybe I think Barnes is better on the issue than most Democrats. I just don't think he's got as strong of a message. He did finally get some really good fundraising numbers though, so maybe that'll help. But his campaign did struggle with money, and obviously Ron Johnson wasn't struggling with money. He had a lot of support from the Republican Party. Um, yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at the dialogue between, or I should say, among Kay, Steve, and yourself, Ezra.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and yeah, in that race, also the polls just seem to be stagnating a little bit, but still all pretty much show Ron Johnson in about a 3-point lead, given bias typically is a little bit more towards Democrats in polling. I think that sort of is why I don't think that Democrats should really be focusing on that as much unless Mandela Barnes is going to be able to use his money well. And I think that was the last debate, but maybe not. If there's another debate and there's more chances for him to get his message out. But otherwise, I would say if you're looking to change the Senate, your focus should be on Warnock, Fetterman, and Mastos. And then otherwise,
Well, if you concentrate on Warnock, that's retaining a seat. Okay, that's already Democrat.
same as Mastos, yeah.
Blake Masters.
No,
Okay.
Mastos, Catherine Mastos in Nevada.
Oh yeah, Catherine Cortez
Because
Masto.
the way it looks right now, it's kind of a toss-up there. It's really hard to say either candidate is going to win.
But she's also fighting one of the tougher candidates from the Republicans, right?
Yeah,
Because
Adam Laxalt.
she's running against a Laxalt.
Yeah.
So the name recognition is very, very strong there.
Mm-hmm.
But you think she's still running even?
I mean, I think she's probably a little bit behind. Polls show they're even, which, yeah, I guess probably means she's a little bit behind. She did have pretty good fundraising numbers, though, for what that's worth. And so
she has money left for ads.
yeah, she's certainly got money left. And if Democrats pull more resources, if they pull out of I don't really know if they're spending much on Iowa, but they probably don't need to be spending, on Iowa. Mark Kelly doesn't need as much money, really. Maggie Hassan.
Mark Kelly is out there now, crying that he's in some kind of emergency situation, and that if he doesn't get more funds.
Mark Kelly's, I've been getting ads for him nonstop over the past 2-3 years he's been running, always asking for money. He's probably, I think he keeps being the top fundraiser of Democratic Senate candidates.
Oh, good.
He's fine. He's got like a 6-point lead in the polls. Like that could change, but honestly, if I were looking to see,
he's got a 6-point lead in the polls, but as we discussed before the show, the polls are so strange in this contest.
Yeah,
That we don't know
just
what to trust and what not to trust.
yeah, certainly. So I think that's worth mentioning. So we were just talking before the show about sort of how out there some of these polls have been. Um, right, we have the generic ballot polls that now, for pretty much the most part, show Democrats starting to gain a little bit again instead of losing. So what's been going on is Democrats are losing support, Republicans are gaining a lot of support. Now Republican support is starting to gain less, and Democrats are gaining more support again. At least according to polling averages, right? But pretty much they're in a deadlock right now, with Republicans having a very small advantage. That being said, all of the recent polls, with the exception of that one poll that also just showed from the polling company that also showed Dr. Oz with a 3% lead in Pennsylvania. So I'm a little cautious of that poll and probably want to do more research on it. Democrats have led 2 to 5% in all the polls since October 24th, or since October 24th is when it was done, but 19th, 24th. So the past 10 polls or so, Democrats have had leads in. So
how is Shapiro doing there?
Yeah, Shapiro's
gubernatorial race.
Yeah, the governor's race there really isn't changing in terms of I think Shapiro went a little down, and I don't really know if that's just the national environment for Democrats right now, and that's what's going on there. But otherwise, I think polling leads still show him at 8 to 9% lead.
That's good.
And I expect that not to change that much. I wouldn't really see why it would. Yeah. It might change a little.
Very reassuring.
Bit.
For another reason. Okay, that reason is if it turns out that Fetterman doesn't progress sufficiently fast, okay, let's say we're looking 6 months from now or 8 months from now, okay, and it sort of develops that he cannot serve, perhaps he resigns, and Shapiro, okay, is in a position to find and appoint a similar candidate to Fetterman.
Yeah, that's true.
On the other hand, if that were not the case, then it would be a much more desperate thing for Fetterman to win.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, can we start going over some specific races?
I mean, yeah, if you want. So overall we've been seeing some turnout numbers coming in mail-in ballots, and you typically those stray a bit older, conservative, as I was telling Joe earlier. And so in the California races, the numbers that came out were pretty much showing Democrats doing better, most of them doing better than you would expect in those swing districts. Certainly there are exceptions. Rudy Sa-
You're frozen, Ezra. Don't know if you can hear me. Yes, Ezra is frozen. Let's see if he can.
Hello?
Hi. Okay, you've been frozen
Hi.
since you began to talk about California.
Yeah.
And how the races were going in California.
Yeah, so the with all the scandals sort of going on in the LA city council races, I think progressives are starting to do a little better there, and they've been really unified too. So Steve's talking about Mejia and Caruso. I think certainly Mejia's been in a good position. His opponent really hasn't had any new messaging come up. I know that the Caruso race with Karen Bass is apparently getting a little closer again. I think there was a poll that just came out about that. But Karen Bass is still maintaining a lead, and she has relatively consistently throughout the election. Well, since she took the lead in the polls. I'd have to double check the legitimacy of that poll. But overall, I think progressives are doing good down ballot. I think that Democrats are doing well in the competitive regions, with the exception of the 22nd district, namely where mail-in ballots, which skew Republican, skew conservative, only have a 1% Democratic lead in a district that Biden won by 8%, that people were sort of saying was lean to likely Democratic, with Rudy Salas unseating Vallejo. There you go. But at this point, it could look like, Blue Dog Democrats did what they could to push through this mediocre but supposedly amazing electoral juggernaut of a candidate in a swing district, as opposed to someone like Brian Osorio, who was the progressive local mayor who was already running in that race. And the party got behind Salas, one of the only two Blue Dog Democrats running now, like non-incumbent Blue Dog Democrats running in 2022, from my understanding. And he's absolutely blundering the race if these numbers hold up, and if Democrats only have a 1% lead in those mail-in ballots. That's not great compared to the rest of the state, where Democrats seem to be having near double-digit leads. Katie Porter has about a 9% lead as of the other day in what mail-in ballots were there, and that's pretty good.
How is Angelica doing?
As far as the actual data that we have, all the mail-in ballots and stuff just come in under party affiliation. So they're just strictly talking about mail-ins. There's really nothing that you can pull out of for that race, or the David Kim race, or the LA City Council races and stuff. But I would say I think David Kim's doing well, but not really much of an update since last week when he talked about how well his fundraising went. Angelica, I'm still a little worried about. She seems to think she's got a good message going in. She's got enough money to do that message, and maybe even a little bit more. So I'm hoping that means something good can happen. I certainly think that progressives are doing well organizing around each other. Kenneth Mejia and Angelica Dueñas and David Kim and maybe have all sort of organized. I know they've been organizing with some of the other local candidates down in LA. And so hopefully they're sort of able to give each other a good boost. But yeah, data-wise, there's really nothing new in that race so much as the other races. Where I think it, keep forgetting where I'm talking about today. But yeah, so Christy Smith against Mike Garcia, right, in the 27th district. There is a 14% lead for Democrats in the early votes, which is quite a lot higher than you would expect.
Yes.
And then in the 10th district, which is an open, sort of swingy, potentially swing state, Democrats have a 10% lead. 13% lead in the 41st district, which ultimately I do think is going to be Republican. But Kevin Calbert has always been a little bit weak of an incumbent, and Liam O'Mara sort of did well at showing that in 2020. And I think there was some, forgetting who ran in 2018, kind of also showed that. So the fact that it's a swing district now, I think sets it up for a flip in the future. If not this year, I don't really think this year, but potentially, right? But yeah, seems like some of these mail-in numbers that we're getting are early votes are sort of leaning better for Democrats in some regions and then not in others. So I don't know if you have questions about specific races, but in terms of
yes, is there any change now if we move up to Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is there any change in the two races we're interested in there?
So in Oregon, I believe that Jamie is working on an ad. I think she did publish an ad recently. So that's going to be going out, if I recall correctly. In terms of reporting on mail-ins. I haven't seen anything in Oregon, but Oregon kind of by default, right, mails out all their ballots anyway. So it's not like those tend to skew any specific way anyway. And a lot of people just kind of wait until the last day or last couple of days of elections to really be voting. So in terms of data, I'm not really seeing anything. I still think Jamie's in a good position. I think Andrea Sandinez is in a pretty good position in those races.
So you think they're both going to win?
I mean, I think they're both going to win. Certainly, as long as nothing really bad happens for Democrats in the next couple weeks, I think, Salinas had a pretty good fundraising compared to her opponent, who, really was, from my understanding, just pretty much fundraising himself, and she's very grassroots of a campaign. And so I think that speaks well to electability. And then Jamie sort of already proven herself in the primary and in her last election, really outperforming Democrats in the region. So I'm not really worried about the two of them. And the other race we were talking about where that there was a little bit of a weird poll was in the Texas 15th race. We haven't really got a poll there in a while, but it did show Michelle Verdejo and I always forget which one's running. Not Maya Flores, the other one, Monica de la Cruz, in sort of a virtual tie in that race, which was interesting. But I would just heed some caution on that poll just because it had like a 48% Hispanic population in the poll. And the district is like set over 75% Hispanic. From my understanding, though, that's sort of Michelle's main demographic anyway, and they're kind of expecting the white voters to be going to Monica de la Cruz. So that poll could actually end up just being really biased towards the Republican. And if that's the case, that's a pretty good sign for Michelle.
Yes, it is.
Bernie's coming down to campaign for her, and also to campaign for, I don't know for Andrea, but I think he did say he's campaigning in Oregon. So I'm assuming for Jamie and maybe Andrea as well, which is cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Is everything shaping up as it's supposed to be for Greg?
For who?
For Greg Casar in Texas.
Yeah, his opponent really doesn't have anything. It's nobody's putting money into that race. So.
Okay. And what's happening to Claudia Zapata?
Sort of the inverse of Greg. She's got some money, but no polling there. Democrats are sort of pulling out of South Texas for no real reason. And certainly it's like an all hands on deck on Michelle's campaign. And so I know that people are putting a lot into that. And I feel like that's probably meaning that people aren't focused on Claudia's race, especially given that all three of those Rio Grande Valley seats could flip hypothetically. Though at this point, I think Cuellar's in a good enough position. And Gonzalez probably is too, unless he makes another weird blunder. Although actually, you know what? I won't say that he wins. That he could entirely lose that race off his own stupidity for carpetbagging. But yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Oh yeah, and Michelle published an ad today that she's going to be on TV ads, or today or yesterday. So she has money now. She can really be getting her name out there more than she already had. She's got a lot of volunteers. Bernie's doing rallies. A lot of people are coming doing rallies and volunteering for her. So overall, I'm feeling pretty good about that race, just in terms of relative to expectations in a seat that Trump won. To have a progressive Democrat be doing really well, hopefully winning, is a good sign.
Okay. Is there any change in Chris DeLuzio's race?
No, I think one of the, let me see if it was Cook. One of them just moved the ratings on his seat, but it didn't make sense to me because he's actually far out fundraised his opponent, has a good messaging. His opponent has some pretty bad ads, right? pretty desperate ads, whereas Chris's message is very good on unions, very good on economic platforms, good on healthcare, and he's got good evidence to sort of show that. And his opponent really doesn't have any good message beyond, oh, you're going to vote like Bernie Sanders.
All right. Are there any polls in that district?
I haven't seen any new polls. I think there was. Did we talk about a poll last week in that district?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, one moment then. And there was a poll that sort of looked at congressional districts in part of Pennsylvania, but I don't know if it had a good enough vote total in the actual districts to mean anything. So let me just pull that up. Okay, my Wi-Fi is not working. Oh, no, I am on call. Okay, I'm still here. It showed me frozen for a second there. Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's any polling here, actually. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions you have.
Yes, I do have.
Yep.
I still have some other questions.
Yep.
With respect to Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
how are things looking for Democrats who are running there?
So, I think it went back towards Republicans a little bit, but overall, still, I'm not really worried about Warnock. I think he's got enough money that it's just going to be enough money, and his opponent's got enough going on. There's another woman who came out alleging that Herschel Walker tried to pressure her into having an abortion. So second woman, I don't know if there's going to be more family response to that and more stuff that comes out like last time and cascading effect of Herschel Walker scandals. But I'm really not that worried about that race. And as far as the governor's race, Stacey Abrams is a fine organizer. I don't really think she had any chance of winning anyway. But I think it's still like Republicans are pulling at 7% lead. Kemp is what Kemp has over her right now in polls.
How do the congressional races look?
There's only one swing race in Georgia now because of the redistricting. They got rid of the other swing race to pack it into Democrats so they could make their own GOP district. The only race there that's remotely competitive is Sanford Bishop's race in the 2nd district, and that's pretty much it. It's a very close district on all levels, but also more reliably Democratic, and Democrats are going to win that seat with a sort of a lean to likely margin, probably 5 to 8 points.
Okay, so let me ask then the big question. As you see it, is there any chance that Democrats can hold the House the way the race has been going?
The way I see it, I mean, there certainly is. I don't think they're favored to. At the same time, we've seen races start to go really in their favor, like the Alaska race, completely unexpected. And, every race counts. I think it's going to be close no matter who wins the House at this point. Certainly under 20 lead for whoever wins the House. And I think if these polls and fundraising numbers show well and Democrats do well in Oregon and, Michelle or candidates like Michelle and Chris Deluzio are able to win, and it's pretty certain Chris is. And then these California numbers come in and they're those hold as the weeks go on and Democrats have good turnout in those swing California races. I think overall things are looking pretty good. My biggest concern is that Democrats did sort of flop in some races, right? Rhode Island 2nd district shouldn't be competitive. and there are certainly some others, Illinois 17, that Democrats really didn't do that well in. If Democrats lose the 34th district, that's probably going to be a bad sign for their
If they lose
ability.
the 34th district, is Delia's district?
Sorry, I'm in 34th district in Texas. The third district is in Illinois. The third district is Delia Ramirez, and the fourth is Che Garcia. And neither of them are going to lose. They're both going to cruise through. These are really solid Democratic districts. But the 34th district is the Vicente Gonzalez one in Texas, and he's kind of not running a great campaign. And technically, he's not the incumbent there. Maya Flores is. And so I think that's just an interesting remark to be made. But overall,
Okay, more questions because I have a. Okay, I'm getting the impression. First, I should summarize. I'm getting the impression that you do think there's still a chance for them to hold the House.
I think there is a chance, and that chance runs through really being able to tighten up turnout in the races that are really competitive right now. I had another idea that I was just going to say. Oh, and sort of same way as the Senate, I think backing off of some of these races that they don't need to be putting money into. The fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene's opponent has raised like over 2 million like every quarter is absolutely ridiculous when she's gonna win it by like 50, 60 points. But yeah, I mean, I think Democrats can win the House. I don't think they're favored. I think it certainly is a matter of if certain regions do well for Democrats, right? If those California swing districts do well, if the Eastern Pennsylvania races go well. Oh, those were the ones I was thinking of, right? So we had our poll of the Susan Wild race that actually shows her a bit ahead, which was unexpected, and Matt Cartwright is more favored than he used to be. So if Democrats suddenly go from what looked like very easy flips for Republicans to being able to hold those two races, I think that with Alaska, with the turnout we're seeing in California races, hopefully in some other races, I think that puts Democrats in a very potentially viable path in terms of winning the House. It's nowhere near as likely as winning the Senate, but certainly possible, I guess.
Okay, I do have one more question about the Virginia 10th.
Mm-hmm. The Wexton race or the Sandberg race?
The Wexton race with this guy, Hung Kao.
Yeah, that's not going to end up being that competitive. The Abigail Sandsberger race in the 7th district is probably going to end up being a little bit competitive. I think Republicans had the opportunity to field two good candidates and spend for them in both those districts, and I think they just kind of settled on focusing on the 7th district. I don't know if that answers your question. So you can ask your question, sorry.
But I didn't ask the question about the 7th district. I asked the question about the 10th.
I know. I was saying you can ask it about the 10th district.
You did. The reason why I have some anxiety about the 10th district is that Hung Kao has huge amount of money for television ads.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say for television ads because I'm not really seeing television ads. I'm seeing ads all over YouTube for Hung Kao.
Mm-hmm.
And he just looks like he has a lot more money than Jennifer does.
Double check that. FEC.gov.
Or is it just
it could just be poor spending. Do you see either of them on TV, or do you not have TV?
No, I have TV. I just don't watch any of the straight channels.
Okay.
I'm always watching alternative channels.
I mean, some candidates tend to put out a lot on YouTube in areas. I don't know enough about the area to know if that's a really good strategy, but sometimes those digital ads really aren't great, especially YouTube ads that people skip after 5 seconds most often. But Jennifer Wexton has a lot of money. I'm sure she's spending a lot of it on ads more effectively, probably, since she's run in a much more competitive race in the past. She has $1.1 million more raised this election cycle than he does, but he has $1 million cash on hand. She has $3 million cash on hand. So certainly going into the end of the election, I think
Okay,
that
but
she's
that
going to
doesn't
be.
account for the independent expenditures, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I think Republicans probably, my assumption would be pulled out of that race in terms of independent expenditures for the most part.
I don't know.
Let
I
me
don't
just
know.
double
That's
check.
what I'm worried about.
So, yeah, the only things that show up here is a $6,000 in favor of Hung Cow from whatever the Guardian Fund is, and then a little bit from the Patriot Front, or Patriot Leadership Trust, which is one of the House Republican PACs. But $6,000 in independent expenditures probably isn't going to be much, but the FEC also doesn't always update the numbers.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for all that. It's really very illuminating. It makes me feel better about the Virginia 10th, certainly.
Yeah, I really wouldn't worry about that race. I'm not even really that worried about the seventh race. Seventh race is certainly going to be more competitive, but I still think Democrats are going to win that. As much as nobody.
How about Elaine Luria's district?
That one, I think, still going to be Republican. If it goes good for Dem, I guess that would be a pretty early indicator. If she wins that race, that's probably a good sign for Democrats. I think there was some fun. Yeah, we are talking
She's
about
won twice now, and this is
Yeah, she's won twice.
her third race, and that's supposed to be a Republican district, and yet she wins.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I keep blanking on what I'm saying today. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's a former naval intelligence officer.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's a decent enough candidate for the district, and I think her opponent's also pretty decent because Republicans really wanted a strong candidate there. That's one that pretty much every model, from my understanding, has as a complete toss-up or a tilt Republican. Though I think one of them recently moved it from lean Republican to toss-up or something like that. So that could be a sense that maybe something's working a little better for Luria there.
She's been on the January 6th committee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and has gotten somewhat featured, on that committee. Not as much as Cheney, of course, but still, she's had a lot of face time,
Mm-hmm.
and she's done well on that. So, yeah, she's not my favorite Democrat, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's pretty damn centrist.
Yeah.
She and Alyssa Slotkin out in Michigan,
Yep.
and Spanberger sort of form a little clique there.
Yeah.
They're not as bad as Josh Gottheimer.
Yeah, certainly
but
not.
close. Josh Gottheimer. God. Okay, so I think we've done it for tonight.
Yep.
So thank you very much, Ezra.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Sorry about the sort of sleepy head, but
that's okay. You still did great.
Thanks. Have a great day, guys.
Okay, you too. So where are we? Okay, so there we are. Kay says, I'm out of here, Joe. Steve is a bummer, but thanks to you and Ezra. Love you both. Steve is not a bummer. He's giving a perspective that we all need. We need to have the cold water occasionally. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I think this has been fun. I think it's been illuminating also in certain respects, because Ezra has a really good handle on how things are looking in particular districts. So thank you again. I will be back here tomorrow. with a number of different shows. I'll be back with another 3 shows. Lana says Steve likes to be a brat. A lot of times, though, he makes a lot of good sense, really. And things do work out his way often enough that we want to listen to what he has to say. Sandy says to bless you, Bonnie.
Oh, thank you.
Steve has his favorites, and we got to admit his favorites are good, like Ulysses, and Kenneth Mejia. And he really likes Angelica, too. So he does like some really good people, right? So I think on that note, I'm going to call it a night because I got to do another 3 shows tomorrow. So I wish a very good night to everyone. And I hope you'll come to my streams tomorrow. Lana says she loves Kenneth. Yeah, I've been watching Kenneth now for a number of cycles. I love Kenneth too. Oh, Steve said,
Cap General tells Russian soldiers take no prisoners and kill everyone.
I would put a pin on that,
That
okay, and
sound right.
investigate that, because I'd be willing to bet a considerable amount of money that that is a piece of propaganda that was generated by people who don't like to tell the truth. But anyway, that's what I think about that.
Yeah.
So, thank you again, everybody, and please don't forget my Patreon account and my Buy Me a Coffee account. And I want to thank Steve Day, who isn't here tonight, but who did buy me a coffee yesterday. That was very nice of him. So thank you, folks.
It's 49 degrees.
And Bonnie says it's 49 degrees in Ashburn, Virginia right now. Okay, good night.